Now that we're moving on from our two-step equations, the next step in equations is considered to be multi-step equations, which means that there's more than just two things that we need to do. But before we start with our multi-step equations, we need to take a second and do a quick review. The term is simplify. When we simplify expressions, it meant that we did two things. It meant that we first look for the distributive property. And if the distributive property is there, we do that first. So if we have this example of our distributive property, remember that it means that we are simply taking the number on the outside of the parentheses and multiplying it, often called distributing it, to everything that's on the inside. So if I were to simplify this expression, notice it's an expression because there's no equal sign. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12 plus negative 3 times x, negative 3x. And again, I put that inside parentheses to separate that plus and minus. Notice a few things. You have your title. Reminder, we are using calculators. We're going to want to be careful of those negative operations. When we simplify, watching out for those negatives is important, and we'll be showing that. So the first step in simplifying, if the distributive property is there, and you'll recognize it by a number right next to the parenthesis, meaning to multiply, we do this first. The next part of simplifying means that we would need to combine any like terms. Now remember, like terms means that they have the identical variable with another term. So let's look at this next expression. And remember, if I go too fast, you simply just need to pause and get caught up. So in this expression here, negative 4x plus 5 minus 3x minus 7, we have some like terms. The first set of like terms that jumps out at me is this negative 4x, and this is a negative 3x. See that minus sign? Remember, a minus is the same exact thing as a negative. And what we've been doing is any subtraction signs, we've been changing those to that plus negative so the negative jumps out at us. But what I'd like you to practice doing is starting to see this term not necessarily as a minus 3x, but a negative 3x. The other set of like terms that we have here, change out my marker to see if green works for us, is the 5 and the negative 7. 5 and negative 7 are considered like terms because they are two terms that don't have a variable at all, which makes them the same. So what I need to do is I need to combine these. I have a negative 4x and a negative 3x. You and your calculator can take negative 3 plus negative 4 plus negative 3. Or you might just remember our rules that if the signs are the same, we're going to add them. So we end up with a negative 7x. Then we have a positive 5 and a minus 7. Remember, a minus 7 is the same thing as a negative 7. Again, you can change that to your plus negative so that negative jumps out. Or if you're practicing and getting good at seeing this minus 7 as a negative 7, you're okay as well. Regardless, we have a 5 and a negative 7. When we combine those like terms, 5 plus negative 7 gives, we always put a plus sign here. 5 plus negative 7 is going to give me a negative 2. You may see our expression written as a negative 7x minus 2. Remember, these are the same thing. As you get over to algebra next year, you're going to be leaving it more as a minus sign. And we're just, again, training that eye to see this as a negative 7, not necessarily as a minus 7. So we review this because in multi-step equations, our process is that we are going to have to simplify. We're going to see the distributive property, we're going to have like terms, and we have to simplify first. We simplify, then we solve. It's almost alphabetical, right? Even though they both start with S, that next letter is I, comes before O. We simplify, then we solve, and then finally we check it. Let's do a couple together. Here we have an equation. Again, it's an equation, not an expression. An equation has an equal sign. We always need to leave ourselves plenty of space. So as I take a look, the first thing I look for is always look for the distributive property. When I look at this, there's no distributive property because there's no number next to parentheses. That's the dead giveaway there. And so that means that we next need to look for like terms. We have like terms, and they have to be on the same side of the equal sign as each other. If there was one on this side and one on this side, it wouldn't matter. But we have like terms on the same side, which means we need to simplify this. Let's remind ourselves that this minus 6a is an actual negative 6a, so we don't mess up our negatives. And again, you may use your calculator. But this 3a and that negative 6a need to be simplified. So 3a plus negative 6a, negative 3a. Now I have my plus 12, I have my equal sign, and I have my negative 9. Notice bringing everything straight down, starting fresh. We don't worry about this one anymore. That's why we bring everything down to keep moving. Now that we simplified, we're left with just a two-step equation that we would solve. Remember, you have to show your inverse operation. I have to see the inverse. So in whatever we work with two-step equations, we always get rid of the addition and subtraction. That's the number without the variable. So we would subtract 12 from both sides. Canceling those 12s out, those eliminate. Let's bring down this negative 3a, my equal sign. Notice it's all nice in a straight line here. And again, using your calculator is fine. You want to type in negative 9 minus 12, and it'll do the math for you. We end up in a negative 21. Make sure your calculator operation works out to be the same, so you should be working it out with me. Pause it as you need to. And now we are left with one last inverse. The last inverse operation we need to use is division. And one of the biggest mistakes I saw in your tests when people took tests was that when we divide, we have to divide by the number that's with the variable. That's the negative 3. Remember, a negative divided by negative is a positive. That's what we want. We want a positive. So we have to divide by the negative 3. That leaves us with a equals, and we do our math, again, using your calculator is fine, negative 21 divided by, make sure you use that division bar, negative 3 gives me a positive 7. Circle your solution. Now with that being said, that was simplifying and that was solving. Now we need to check it. When we check it, we take this original equation right here and we're going to rewrite it. And wherever we have the letter A, we're going to be substituting the number 7. So we have 3 times, use parentheses please, 7, don't use an X, plus 12. And I'm going to go ahead and leave my plus negative there. So we have plus negative 6, parentheses, sorry, just to separate those, times 7 needs to equal negative 9. And again, we're using a calculator, but we also need to use our order of operations. We have to make sure this works. So if you want to pause it and try to calculate it and see if it comes out to be negative 9, go right ahead. Hopefully it does. When I do mine, and when you do yours, you have to follow PEMDAS. That means that we're going to do this multiplication first. Right here, there's 2 sets of multiplication. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 12, plus negative 6 times 7 is going to give me a negative 42. Again, hoping that this equals negative 9 when I get done. Now again, picking up my calculator, just like you should, and I'm going to put in 21 plus 12 plus my negative 42. Thank goodness it came out to be negative 9. I hope yours did too. If it didn't, we want to make sure that we figure that out. And it checks. That was good. Now, let's go on to the next one. Again, simplify first, then solve, and then check. Here's our next example. Now in this example, we will again always want to look for that distributive property, which is what we see here. What stands out at us, remember that it can be on either side of that equal sign. We leave it on that side. So here we have the distributive property. Simplify it first. That means take your 2 and distribute it to everything in here. Leave your 14 on the left side. 2 times x is 2x. Bring down your plus sign. 2 times 5 is 10. Don't forget to multiply by 2 to everything that's on the inside. Now, we don't have any like terms that we can combine, so now we're just going to solve this. If you want to pause it and finish it out, go right ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Subtract your 10 first. Remember to show that inverse operation. I have to see it. Now bring down the 2x. Notice how I'm keeping everything lined up. There's my equal signs all lined up. 14 minus 10 is 4. Again, using your calculator if you'd like. Now let's divide by 2. 2's cancel. And I'll put it in a different color so we can see it. X is brought down. There's my equal sign. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Let's hope this works. Again, here we have, that's my original. Use your original equation. So I have 14. So let's check this. And again, if you want to pause this and do it yourself and see if yours works before I work it out, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to continue working it here. 2 times, now for x, I'm going to put my 2 plus 5. And whenever I'm checking, I follow order of operations. I don't necessarily use distributive property if I don't have a variable. So when I check this, I'm going to do my parentheses first. 2 plus 5 is 7. Then I can times it by 2. Now I know that this is 14, and it works. Again, it's always a relief when you plug it in, it works, you know that your answer is the correct answer. We have one last example. We are going to see problems that have both distributive property and like terms, and this is an example of one. So as you copy it down, taking a look, we always do the distributive property first. Now before I do that, I have this minus sign. Again, you could run into some double negatives when we're multiplying, and a messed up negative will mess up the entire problem. So when you're simplifying, using that distributive property or combining like terms, it's kind of a good idea to be able to see the negatives. So that's what I'm doing first. I'm getting that subtraction sign out of there, and I'm going to change it to plus negative, only because I'm using my distributive property and I'm simplifying. So negative 3 times c gives me negative 3c. Negative 3 times negative 1 gives me a positive 3. Now I have this plus 9. No more parentheses. Bring down my 15. Again, you can be checking yours with mine. You can do it along with me. You could pause it and do it on your own. Now I have to look to see. I can't solve it yet. I have to see if I have any like terms. And I do. I can simplify 3 and 9 and get 12. Now we simply have a two-step equation to solve. Get rid of this 12 first by subtracting it from both sides. Cancel those 12s out. I'm left with a negative 3c, an equal sign. 15 minus 12 is 3. Looks like it's going to work out very nicely for me. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. Don't forget that negative. Whenever we're dividing and multiplying, use the number that's with the variable. I had just enough room. C, there's my equal sign. I do my math. I get negative 1. I circle my solution. Now the real trick is, let's go ahead and check this. Again, if you want to pause it and check it on your own to see if it works, go right ahead. Otherwise, work along with me. Take your original equation. 15 equals negative 3 times, and then for C, I'm going to put negative 1. I'm going to keep this as a plus negative 1. Again, got rid of that subtraction sign so I can clearly see my math with my negatives. Plus 9. PEMDAS says parentheses first. So do the parentheses first, right here. That's a negative 1. Come on, marker, work for me. There it goes. Negative 1 plus negative 1 is a negative 2. I'm going to keep this parenthesis because that negative 3 is multiplied by it. So we have to do multiplication next. Follow order of operations. Negative 3 times negative 2 is a positive 6. 6 plus my 9 is my 15. Whew. That is awesome. Checking it sometimes can be troublesome. So if you're ever working through your problems and it's not checking out and you cannot find your mistake, please don't erase your answers. put a star next to it, take a picture of it, send it to me, or if you're here in person, come see me, but do not erase your work. Let me go through. I have all the problems worked out. I will be able to look at your work and help you find your mistake. Sometimes your answer's right, and we made a mistake in our calculation when we check it. So do not erase any of your work. Put a star next to it if you need my help, and I'll be able to help you and help dissect your work, and we'll get to the root of it.